1 from Beyond the Horizon. You'll grab the page to complete your reading assignment that goes along with it. It should say Lesson 2 at the top. And right about here, it should say 518, week of 518, day 1. You'll also notice it says 12 to 18 from Beyond the Horizon. Those are the pages you're going to want to reread after. You can do that either on Canvas, or you can just rewind the video to those parts at the end and read those again to make sure you've got everything you need. All right, let's get started. So we're reading chapter 1 today from pages 4 to 22. Chapter 1. How long before you sail? Sarah asked, dropping her eyes to the ground. She could feel the stare of the coachman Henry, who sat at the front of her father's carriage, the faint shade of a smile on his lips. Wow, I really want you to listen for all of that descriptive language this story has. There's a whole lot of it. She could hear the impatient jangle of the reins on the horse's harness as she fixed her eyes on her father, dressed in his captain's uniform. Henry could feel the tension in the air as he busied himself securing Sarah's father's traveling chest to the top of the carriage. 3 or 4 days, if conditions favor us, her father said, glancing at the treetops bending in the wind. 3 days, Sarah whispered. And then how many years to follow? I shall return before you know it, Sarah. Why, I wager you and Aunt Mary will not miss me at all. Sarah's father smiled at the stern woman at his daughter's side, but she didn't smile back. Something as warm as a smile rarely graced Aunt Mary's face. My heart tells me differently, said Sarah, gripping her father's hand tightly. Please, take me with you. There's Aunt Mary. There's Sarah. Her father reached over and pushed a loose strand of golden hair behind Sarah's ear and ran his warm hand down her cheek. Have we not trodden this path enough of late? You know India is no place for a girl, nor is the ocean. India sounds wondrous, said Sarah wistfully. It's a barbarous place with barbarous people. Mark my words. It is duty alone that drives me. I want you to think about how judgmental he's being over a place that he hasn't been to yet, and neither has she. So they're kind of judging a whole group of people, and there's a lot of people over there. He's judging a whole lot of people based on something that he doesn't know. Sarah's father insisted. He shook his head. There is no more to be said. Then fare thee well, said Sarah, failing to keep the bitterness from her voice. Go to your duty, she muttered. Let us not part on such terms, Sarah, her father whispered softly, his expression sinking. He bent down and kissed her on the cheek. It wasn't until the coach disappeared over the hill and Aunt Mary ordered her to come inside that Sarah realized she had not even returned his kiss. You can see how she's feeling. With her father gone little more than a day, the house became a tomb. Dark clouds and rain drained any remaining cheer. Sarah knew then that she had to break free and follow her father or risk withering away until there was nothing left of her. It was better to take her chances at sea, she thought, and as she pondered, a plan came to her. She would need to act quickly, though. Her father's ship, the Trades Increase, would soon be setting sail. Henry's spare breeches and tunic were on the clothesline. He was taller than Sarah, and broader too, but they would do. Sarah also knew Henry left his shoes, doublet, and cap by the back door at night. She admired the fine doublet, but it was too grand for her disguise. As she took the other clothes, she hoped he would forgive her. She would take the pennies left by her father and some bread and cheese from the kitchen, and that would be just enough for her to see her to Gravesend Port. Sarah cut her hair that night by the glow of the kitchen fire, hacking at it with a pair of shears. A part of her ached as she watched her locks drop to the floor, but she knew the golden shackles would hold her back. Lose them, and she was unrecognizable, and that was what she needed to be. Sarah pushed what remained of her hair under Henry's cap, her neck suddenly seeming cold and bare. Henry's tunic smelled of earth and sweat. His breeches were loose, and his shoes were damp. Not that any of that mattered. Grabbing her cloth bag, Sarah slipped the latch on the kitchen door without a sound and drifted out into the night. She quickly found the road and set off for the town. A coach to Gravesend would leave at daybreak. Aunt Mary would figure out where she had gone, but by then it would be too late. Sarah doubted her aunt would shed a single tear. There she is leaving. Looks like she's at the boat now. But what do you know of cooking? The cook of the Trades Increase asked as he eyed the boy in the bosun hat the bosun had sent his way. Standing there on the dock, the cook thought that the boy couldn't have been more than 13, and thin as well. I have helped cook in the kitchen at home. I mean, in my master's kitchen, Sarah corrected herself. Pheasant, pies, roasts, and the like. The cook chuckled. Very grand, I warrant, but there's not much of a call for that on a voyage across the oceans. I need the work, sir, said Sarah, continuing. I will prove myself, you'll see. The cook shook his head. You may soon wish you weren't on board. Sailing to India is no fairy tale. He paused and thought for a moment. Notice we're on page 12, so this would be a good spot to check the time on the video so that you know where to come back to. There she is with man. A ginger cat swaggered toward Sarah through the boxes and sacks on the wharf and rubbed against her legs. She bent down to scratch him behind the ears, and then looked up at the cook for his verdict. Sir? Very well, then, the cook relented, but only because we're sailing with the tide, and because Tom here has taken a fancy to you, said the cook, nodding towards the cat. Thank you, sir, Sarah beamed. Now come hither. What did you say your name was? Sam, Sarah thought quickly. Well, Sam, let's give word to the mate. But you'd better not play the fool. Captain Booth's not one for fools. The cook gestured to the quarterdeck. Sarah caught sight of the captain surveying the ship, a blue doublet done up against the wind, a sword by his side, his arms folded behind his back. She tried hard not to smile, but sure enough, it was her father conducting his final checks before they set sail for India. Sarah was happy to know that the same waves that passed below her feet also passed beneath her father's feet, that they felt the same wind, that they faced the same peril. But life for the cook's boy was very different from that of a captain. Their paths rarely crossed, and when they did, Sarah kept her head down. She could not reveal herself on board the ship and weaken her father's authority. Below decks, it was damp and sticky, the stale air heavy with the breath of many men. Sarah shared their stench, their coughs, and their cries in the night. Her clothes became thick with dirt and grease. At least it wasn't hard for her to stay in disguise. None of the seamen washed. Their tiny galley, Sarah and cook did what they could to provide good sustenance to their men. Their rations consisted of salted beef and hardtack, the ship's biscuit, as hard as a stone, and dripping and cheese while supplies lasted. Month after month passed, months of creaking wood, of rolling storms, of leaking planks, and a sickly feeling in the pit of the stomach. When the winds deserted them off the coast of Africa, they drifted aimlessly in the doldrums, the air becoming so thick they feared they would choke. When they dropped anchor and took shelter for more months as wicked gales took it in turn to lash the convoy, the trade's increase was forced to drop anchor several more times to stock up on water and provisions, and once for weeks on end to allow the carpenter to rebuild the rudder. "At least this means we have fresh food for a change," said Captain Booth, eyeing the table one night as they lay off the coast of Madagascar. Lieutenant Armitage of the Adventurer, their sister ship, dined with the captain as Sarah stood at the door with a bowl in her hands, her eyes firmly fixed on the floorboards. "That does it, Captain," agreed Armitage. "Curse that infernal rudder all the same. Nearly a year has passed since we set sail, and our business has not even begun." "The treaty and the land will be ours, sir," Armitage assured the captain. "All in good time." "Let us hope so," sighed Captain Booth. "Will that be all, Captain?" Sarah squeaked, barely raising her eyes. Captain Booth paused for a moment. "Have we sailed together before, boy?" he asked, looking Sarah up and down. "No, Captain," Sarah replied, keeping her voice as steady as she could. She dared not look at her father in the eye. "This is my first time at sea," she whispered, her heart pounding. "Then thank Cook for his troubles, boy," said Captain Booth, dismissing her. Sarah closed the cabin door behind her, leaving the captain and Armitage to their meal, and scuttled quickly back to the galley. "What is this treaty the captain seeks?" Sarah asked back at the galley, telling Cook what she'd heard. "The company has an eye to gaining land and setting up a factory, a proper trading post," said Cook, sitting with Tom in his lap as he watched Sarah clean the dishes. "The captain is seeking a treaty from the Mughal emperor himself, a piece of paper that says we can take from India what we please." Cook laughed. "He'll make this company a fortune, you mark my words." Sarah thought for a moment and asked, "Do you think him a good man, Cook?" "He can be a funny old cove, I'll warrant you that," said Cook, "but he's a rare and goodly captain, and I've sailed with a few." Sarah turned her face for a moment in case Cook saw her flush with pride. She found a piece of chewed beef on one of the plates and leaned over to feed it to Tom. "Well, I for one will be glad to get to India and get off this ship," she said. I offered you feel that way," said Cook with a smile. "Now be quick with those dishes, Bildrat." With favorable winds at its back, the trade's increase crossed the Indian Ocean without further delay, and the crew arrived on India on September 14th, a full year and 3 months since they had left the docks at Gravesend. On the voyage, Sarah had watched from a distance how her father's hair had turned gray at the sides, and how his face had become creased and aged. She understood now why he had tried to protect her from the journey. Men had dropped like flies aboard the trade's increase, departing this life with scurvy or the flux, and the same was true for the adventurer. Her father felt the burden. As the shadow of India crept towards them over the horizon, Sarah could see the weight of these worries begin to lift from his shoulders. He was looking forward to the business and the days ahead, and with a flutter in her chest, Sarah realized that she was too. Okay, so that was this chapter, and I'll see you tomorrow for the next one.